The night sky over the Don River was black and breathless, the kind of silence you only notice when you're listening for trouble. Then, a low buzz, tiny, insistent, almost polite, threaded its way toward a forest of concrete. A pinprick of movement, a blink of navigation lights, and a shape barely larger than a motorcycle cut across the outline of a cooling tower. A flash, a thud like a closed fist, and when the vapor drifted away, the only visible scar was a soot-black smudge on pale concrete. A stain, fleeting, almost trivial, yet heavy enough to ricochet around the world's risk radar. Russia says a Ukrainian drone crashed into the Novovoronezh nuclear power plant in the Voronezh region, striking a cooling tower without impairing operations or causing casualties. The operator, Rosenergoatom, claimed the UAV had been suppressed by technical means before it hit the tower, an electronic warfare nudge gone wrong. The company emphasized that radiation levels stayed normal and plant safety remained secure. Separately, the UN nuclear watchdog said there was no danger to nuclear safety from the incident. For a war that has already upset nearly every red line, this was a brush against the thickest one of all. To understand why this moment matters, you need to know what Novovoronezh is and is not. It is not Chernobyl. It's a flagship site in Russia's civil nuclear portfolio, an operating complex whose modern units are VVER, pressurized water reactors, Russia's export showpieces, surrounded by the towering cylinders that breathe heat away from enormous cooling loops. It sits in the Voronezh region north of the Ukrainian border, on a stretch of river whose geography invites both industry and, in wartime, anxiety. A strike here doesn't threaten a runaway graphite fire. It threatens confidence. Confidence that the war's technological sprawl hasn't finally collided with an unforgiving physics lesson. So what actually happened? According to Russian accounts, shortly after midnight between October 6th and 7th, a combat UAV approached the complex. Electronic defenses reportedly interfered with its guidance, and the drone detonated against a cooling tower serving one of the plant's power units. A dark mark remained on the tower. Operations continued as planned. Ukrainian officials have, so far, kept their public comments to a minimum, consistent with Kyiv's broader habit of strategic ambiguity about deep strikes. The official narrative in Moscow stresses restraint and safety. The unofficial takeaway in every capital is the same. The war just wrote nuclear and drone into the same sentence again, and everyone felt it. It's not an isolated line in the story. Over the past year, Ukraine has pushed a relentless deep strike campaign into Russian territory. Cheap airframes, clever guidance, and a swarm logic designed to saturate gaps in air defenses. In August and September alone, Ukrainian drones repeatedly hit Russian energy, logistics, and early warning sites far beyond the front. In the same Voronezh region, Ukrainian operatives struck the Lysky railway junction, an important artery for ammunition and troop movements, demonstrating both reach and intent to stress the Russian rear. Earlier, Ukrainian UAVs also hit the Voronezh D-M over-the-horizon radar at Armavir, a piece of Russia's strategic early warning network. Symbolically potent, technically daring. These operations don't happen in a vacuum. They form a pattern of pressure on the infrastructure that keeps Russia's war machine fed, fueled, and warned. ISW, the Institute for the Study of War, has tracked this evolution closely. Their assessments in early October outlined simultaneous trends. Russia firing massive mixed packages of missiles and Shahed drones to grind Ukraine's energy grid, and Ukraine reciprocating with deep drone raids against military industrial, fuel, and radar nodes inside Russia's borders. Both sides are learning, iterating, and targeting the opponent's nervous system. In that adaptive knife fight, drones aren't sideshow gadgets. They're the main axe understudies, stepping into roles once reserved for expensive missiles or manned aircraft. When the battlefield stretches into the other side's rear, the definition of frontline becomes more of a suggestion than a map feature. That brings us back to Novovoronezh. Cooling towers are not reactors, and a strike on a tower, while alarming, doesn't equal a meltdown risk. But the semantics don't nullify the signal. Nuclear facilities, even when they're robust and hardened, are stuffed with equipment that wasn't built to play dodgeball with explosives. Moreover, electronic warfare inside a complex environment is like trying to swat a mosquito with a sledgehammer while balancing a tray of nitroglycerin. You might nail the insect, but you'd better be very sure about everything else on the table. If Rosenergoatom's account is correct, electronic suppression altered the drone's path into the cooling tower. A reminder that EW wins can have slapstick trajectories. It's like jamming a shopping cart. You've stopped the driver from steering, but the cart still rolls downhill toward something. To be clear, the war has already courted nuclear risk from multiple directions. On August 24th, Russian officials acknowledged that a Ukrainian drone strike forced a reactor at another plant to reduce power, and fires have been reported near auxiliary equipment at nuclear sites when intercepts or debris went astray. The IAEA has repeatedly warned that drones, both explosive and reconnaissance, are haunting nuclear facilities in Ukraine and Russia alike, citing an incident in late September when a UAV detonated around 800 meters from Ukraine's South Ukraine nuclear plant. The Zaporizhzhia plant, meanwhile, has endured blackouts and backup generator sprints that set every nuclear engineer's teeth on edge. All of this creates a background radiation of anxiety. Even if systems work as designed, they are being forced to do so in conditions they were never meant to endure for months on end. So why might a Ukrainian drone be anywhere near Novovoronezh? Context and probability matter. Ukraine's deep strike campaign has prioritized oil refineries, logistics hubs, and air defense nodes, targets with tangible military payoff. When Kyiv talks about its long-range strike philosophy, it frames it as starving the Russian war machine. Less fuel, fewer shells, more headaches for commanders. Multiple outlets have documented large-scale Ukrainian drone barrages against oil and defense infrastructure across Russia this month, and Ukraine has been loud about using domestically produced drones and missiles to do it. A nuclear plant isn't just a low-payoff target, it's a political grenade. The likeliest explanation, if the Russian account is accurate, is that the UAV was either misnavigated by interference, confused by terrain and countermeasures, or simply went out of control, ending in an unintended strike against a structure that, while critical, sits outside the core radiological hazard chain. That's not exculpation, it's a hard lesson from a battlefield where GPS lies, radio stutter, and precision becomes a probability curve. But even if the hit was accidental, the incident has rhetorical utility. For Moscow, it's an exhibit in a case about Ukrainian recklessness. Kyiv as the party willing to risk a radiological incident on Russian soil. For Kyiv, it's an invitation to point back at Zaporizhzhia, Chernobyl power cuts, and the Russian practice of siting military equipment near or around sensitive facilities, then crying foul when blowback scorches the paint. Neither side is a neutral narrator. Both are attempting to marshal the word nuclear into pressure against international nerves. Audiences in Europe and beyond don't need a primer on why. A nuclear mishap doesn't respect borders, and politicians know that voters remember the acronyms ZNAES, SUNPP, Chernobyl, more than they remember the casualty numbers in yesterday's communiques. Let's talk about the plant itself for a minute. Those hyperbolic hyperbolas of concrete, the iconic cooling towers, do a simple job at grand scale. They help shed heat from secondary loops before water cycles back into the system. They're tall, light, and comparatively fragile next to a reactor building. Hitting one is far from ideal. You can knock out heat exchange capacity and stress the grid, but it's not the same as breaching containment. It's structural engineering and redundancy, not magic, that keeps an oops on the outside from becoming an oh no on the inside. The IAEA's no danger phrasing here is important. It doesn't mean no risk ever. It means this specific event didn't penetrate the thresholds that trigger real radiological concern. In nuclear safety, thresholds are the alphabet of sanity. Now, stack this event on top of the drone war's other chapters and a picture forms. Ukraine has struck as far as Tyumen, Nizhny Novgorod, and the occupied Crimean coast. Russia has loosed storm after storm of missiles and shaheds to pound Ukraine's grid, industry, and morale. Both sides are trying to calibrate pain without catalyzing an international red card. Drones are simply the cheapest way to conduct that long-distance argument. Build a body from plywood and carbon, add a lawnmower engine, tape on a payload, and you have strategic reach at a price point that makes accountants smile and air defense officers swear. Electronic warfare grows in parallel. Spoofers, jammers, decoys, until the radio spectrum looks like rush hour traffic and the GPS constellation becomes a hall of mirrors. There's a specific irony to Novovoronezh. The defensive tool that supposedly stopped the drone, EW, may have created the impact by stripping guidance, letting inertia and geometry do the rest. To use a different metaphor, you can make the bee dizzy, but that doesn't guarantee it won't land on the wrong flower. The solution isn't to turn EW off. It's to build electronic defenses with range gates and behavior models that minimize drift into the object we're trying to protect. Easier said than done when your opponent's software is evolving as fast as your own. From a strategic lens, there are 4 implications worth underlining. First, signaling. Even if unintended, drone plus nuclear site is a message in 200-point font. Kiev's deep strike narrative is about legitimacy, hitting military and war-sustaining targets. Moscow's counter-narrative is about escalation and recklessness. Clicking the nuclear square on this bingo card gives both sides a speech. It also nudges European governments to tighten export controls and accelerate counter-drone aid, because nobody wants their domestic politics hijacked by a plume. Second, normalization. Drones near nuclear sites used to be exceptional. Now they're episodic. At South Ukraine NPP, a drone detonated within a kilometer of the perimeter in late September, prompting fresh IAEA language about recurring risk. At Kursk, fires have flared after intercept debris hit auxiliary equipment. The more these incidents happen without catastrophe, the more military planners subconsciously discount them. And that is precisely when complacency grows teeth. War teaches with a curve. Physics punishes with a cliff. Third, law and liability. International humanitarian law doesn't carve out special, magical sanctuaries for nuclear plants, but it does impose strict proportionality and precaution standards. If drones are increasingly autonomous or semi-autonomous, the legal chain of intent becomes murkier, not cleaner. Who owns an EW deflected impact? The sender? The defender? The algorithm? Lawyers will be arguing that one long after the smoke clears. Fourth, engineering and doctrine. If we accept that drones will buzz around critical infrastructure for the remainder of this war, operators need to separate nuclear safety from nuclear operation. That means layered defenses that keep ordnance away from cooling systems, diesel stores, control buildings, and switchyards. It also means rehearsing rapid redundancy drills for when something knocks out heatsink capacity, because those drills are the firebreak between incident and accident. Back on the Ukrainian side, the logic of deep strikes hasn't changed. Kyiv is trying to impose dilemmas, force Russia to defend everywhere, thin its air defenses at the front, and make rear area logistics a permanent migraine. Defense Express has chronicled how Ukraine's unmanned units, including specialized regiments, stitched together waves of attacks on oil refineries and logistics nodes through late summer. The raids into Voronezh region against radar and rail infrastructure fit that doctrine perfectly. Strip away sensing, delay replenishment, and make Russia spend 10 rubles in defense for every hryvnia Ukraine spends in attack. ISW's nightly reads frame it the same way, a duel of adaptation, where each side's strike patterns are less about single night headlines and more about exhausting the other's ability to respond effectively on all fronts at once. If you're looking for an escalation ladder, here's what it does not include: deliberate attacks on reactor containment or spent fuel pools. That crosses a political Rubicon neither side benefits from, but the rungs we're on are uncomfortable enough. The longer this war continues, the more edge cases we'll see. UAVs blown off course into the wrong fence line, intercepts dumping hot fragments where you don't want them, and operators making split-second calls in electromagnetic chaos. Nothing about this is tidy. A word on public psychology. Nuclear triggers a different part of the brain. People don't picture a black smudge on a tower. They picture the grainy footage of a Soviet plant with no roof. Officials know this, which is why post-incident statements rush to the words "no danger," "radiation normal," "operations unaffected." They are telling the truth here, but they're also playing defense against panic, because panic has a way of writing its own logic into policy. If you're in the business of protecting nuclear plants, your job isn't to make people unafraid. It's to make fear irrelevant by design. On the Russian side, expect 2 tracks. 1. Physical, hardening around nuclear sites, more EW perimeters, and likely a surge in point defense guns that can swat slow movers without spreading flaming shrapnel across auxiliary equipment. 2. Political, amplifying the narrative that Ukrainian strikes are teetering into irresponsibility, especially as winter looms, and Ukraine openly touts the domestic production of long-range drones and missiles to keep pace with Russian bombardments. Kyiv, for its part, will point at the charred substations of Zaporizhia, the power cuts to Chernobyl's safety systems, and the steady drip of IAEA bulletins as evidence that Moscow plays with matches around the powder keg too. And the IAEA will keep doing what it must: count generators, measure background, and remind everyone that safety is a verb, not an adjective. Zoom out, and the incident at Novovoronezh is a small crater in a vast battlefield. But it's the location of the crater that matters. Drones have democratized long-range warfare. They have also compressed the distance between military target and civilian catastrophe. Cooling towers aren't intended targets. They're bystanders with big silhouettes. Yet, as long as the war's electromagnetic weather remains violent, jammers churning, GPS spoofing, data links fighting, the skies around critical infrastructure will remain risky even when nobody intends them to be. The lesson isn't to stop drones. It's to evolve defenses and doctrine faster than the threat evolves. There were mercifully no casualties here, no radiological release, just that blackened patch of concrete, a bruise that fades. But symbolically, the mark is indelible. It says that in 2025, the line between a daring strategic strike and a global panic can be as thin as a misread coordinate or a few microseconds of jamming. It says that even safe outcomes leave the world a little more tired, a little more aware of how close the margin can get. And it says that the next war, and the next after that, will have to plan for drones as ubiquitous as the wind. The camera pulls back from the cooling tower. Steam billows, indifferent. Somewhere, a low hum rises again. Another sortie, another problem set. You can almost hear the calculus being done in hangars and bunkers. Cost, risk, effect, message. Ukraine will keep reaching deep, because that's how you shake a bigger adversary. Russia will keep hardening, because that's how you protect a vulnerable empire of pipes, rails, and power plants. And the rest of us will keep holding our breath every time a headline squeezes drone and nuclear into the same line. So here's the final question, the one that lingers after the noise. Was this the war brushing the guardrail, or the warning before the curve tightens? The answer depends on whether the lessons get learned faster than the drones get built. A black smudge on concrete isn't a catastrophe. It's a second chance. What happens with the third?